hours. But we want to thank you. So I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Sherelja Williams, and I am part of the emergency response team. And so we're really tasked with ensuring that everyone in our chapter, as well as the community, are aware of how to be prepared for emergency situations. That's what our program is going to be about tonight. I'm going to now just pass things over to Bridget Herring Williams, our president, to give us a welcome.
Are you ready to weather any storm or natural disaster? Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening to learn more about emergency preparedness. Whether you're a seasoned prepper or just starting to think about your safety plan, we're here to help you be better prepared for unexpected events. Special thanks to our guest speaker, Cole Whitehurst, with the Cabarrus County Emergency Management Office, and to Sora Williams and our emergency response team for always serving in the forefront to make sure that we all have the needed information to keep us safe. So again, thank you so very much for being here with us this evening, and I'll now turn the program back over to Sora Williams.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little introduction of our guest speaker, Cole. We want to thank him again for being with us. And then afterwards, we're going to launch a little poll that we want to get your feedback on. At any time, if you have questions, please enter them in the chat, and I will make sure that I address those so that Cole can answer any questions that you may have. All right. So without further ado, I would like to introduce everyone to Cole Whitehurst. And Cole is a dedicated emergency management planner with Cabarrus County Emergency Management. In this role, Cole is really responsible for maintaining the coordination of the local emergency planning committee. He also manages the continuity of operations program and is also the project lead of what's called Land Search, which is an advisory council. As far as education goes, Cole holds a master's of science in Homeland Security and disaster management that he got from Liberty University. And he has an active certification as an associate emergency manager from the International Association of emergency managers. Cole has a strong passion for emergency preparedness, and that was cemented in him while he spent time with the North Carolina National Guard. So that's really a part of him. He has a passion for it, and that's where he will be sharing a lot of his history with us. All right. He also seeks to enhance the resilience of the community that he serves. So not only did he get this education, he wants to be actively involved in the community and make sure that we are aware of everything and our surroundings. All right. So when Cole is not out saving the day, watching radars, I don't know if he chases storms or not, but when he's not doing that, you can find him out hiking on a trail, or you might see him on Lake Norman, kayaking, or he might just be enjoying coffee with his church group. So that is our Mr. Cole, who's going to be helping us tonight. So at this time, we're going to quickly just launch a poll to get some feedback from everyone. And let's see if we can get that poll launched at all here. All right. So, and the question is, do you currently have an emergency preparedness plan in place? So everyone go ahead and just tell us and we'll see where we are. All right. So I'm just going to give it a few more minutes here. So it looks like about 15% of us have a plan in place, 59% do not, and about 26% do have a plan in place. So let's just put this up here. All right. So I'm going to just go ahead and pass it over to Cole. I also want to talk about how this could not come at a better time for us to talk about emergency preparedness. First of all, September is National Emergency Preparedness Month, and we all know what has happened over the weekend with the storm. And there are several people in Western North Carolina who continue to be without any type of power, internet. And if you've seen any of the pictures, you can see the devastation that's happened. So I think it's very important that we all really hone in what Cole has to say to us. And I think that we'll all learn a lot from this presentation tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Cole.
Perfect. Thank you. See if I can get the screen shared here. Let's see. Can we see the slide deck there?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, well, thanks for introducing me, and thank you all for having me on. I'm excited to talk about this with you. And as you said, this really couldn't come at a better time. We know what's going on in Western North Carolina, and even here, we tend to think that bad things aren't going to happen to us. That's a problem for the coast. That's a problem for down in Florida and Texas, those kind of areas. But in reality, you never know. So the Western side, people are working day and night right now, still doing active search and rescue. Roads are closed. They're having to fly in supplies, food, water, power, like you said. So it's a tough situation, and being prepared can make those tough situations a little bit better. So I'm excited for this. So I'll go ahead and get into it. I'll start in. Yep. Introduced me already, but I am emergency management planner with Cabarrus County Emergency Management. So as you said, I have a passion for it. I love it. Cemented during my time with the military, but I think my real passion on it is the personal side of it. I'm a big believer in the sentiment that everyone is responsible for their own safety. And because of this, I'm passionate about helping individuals become more resilient. And to that end, we'll be going through some of the aspects today that will help you enhance your personal preparedness. So as we're moving through, feel free to ask any questions. I don't mind being interrupted at all. Actually, sometimes I don't like just listening to my own voice, so I'd love to hear some. And yeah, at the end as well, I reserve some time to answer anything that's come up through it. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So why does preparedness matter? I thought I'd have to give you a really good spiel on this and sell it to you, but all we got to do is look to our neighbors to the west, and I think that's a pretty good sell on it. But to move through it, emergencies, they can happen at any time. We're in hurricane season, but you never know when something's going to happen. Hurricanes actually they're devastating, but they're one of the few that we get early warning on. Other things, just happen in the blink of an eye, and there you are trying to deal with it. So the events can take the form of the natural disaster, like a flood, and they can be human-caused events like an active shooter event or terrorism, as terrible as that is, or it can even be a technological failure, such as a chemical spill or a dam failure, something along those lines. So if you're prepared, if you're not prepared, you and your loved ones could be left, scrambling to find the basic needs or making those rushed, uninformed decisions in the middle of an emergency, which is really the last time you want to be trying to figure out your plan. Preparedness also helps reduce the impact of the situations. So preparedness will help you make sure you have the knowledge, the tools, and the resources to really stay safe no matter what you're dealing with. And kind of what we do today on the preparedness side, the creating the plans, preparing kits, and learning our emergency skills, it can significantly increase our chance of surviving the disaster of tomorrow. So just to give those in some nice little bullet points there, by being prepared, we'll be able to lower our risk, enhance our family safety, become adaptable to any situation, and return to our normal lives faster after a disaster. And, personally, finally, I think this is the most important, but I've kind of found a peace of mind from being prepared that gives me a sense of calm and kind of a quiet confidence in my daily life. If I have the tool set, the skills, and the knowledge to get through even the worst situations. It really makes dealing with the the annoyance of traffic a little bit easier. So to get into how to be prepared, we first kind of got to understand what we might be looking at. So let's talk through the different types of emergencies you might face. Broadly speaking, there's three categories to it: the natural, the technological, and the human caused. I'll give you a rapid fire example list of natural emergencies, but we're looking at droughts, hailstorms, extreme heat, hurricanes, tornadoes, winter storms, earthquakes, lightning, landslides, volcanoes, tsunamis, wildfires, flooding. With the natural side, they're often regional and affect large populations at one time. So if we look at Helene, it's taken out, let's see, McDowell County, Buncombe, Yancey's struggling. So it's not just an isolated event to one city, it's a large area. Moving on, technological emergencies can include things like power outages, cyber attacks, dam failures, nuclear accidents, or a hazardous material spill. Kind of a sidebar note here, a lot of times these scenarios can be mixed and cause or complicate one another. So the hurricane with the flooding that knocks down, so takes out a substation, then you're dealing with a power outage in the middle of dealing with flooding and landslides. So they can all run together. And then finally, human caused active shooter situations, terrorism, they're rare, but they can be devastating on both the life safety front and the emotional mental toll that can come from those things. So although each emergency kind of has a unique planning and response consideration, many of the preparatory strategies you would use to be prepared for them can kind of be consistent across the board. So for an easy example, if there's a need to evacuate your home, if it's for a hurricane or a wildfire, one's a lot of water, one's the complete opposite of water, it really doesn't matter because the fact remains that you've got to leave. So the focus is on having a plan that'll streamline those general processes. So I threw a rapid fire list of all these hazards at you. And even if I read that list and I'm in the field, I say, oh my God, there are so many things I've got to think about and be prepared for and be scared of, frankly. And, kind of to balance that out and put it in perspective, one of the first steps in being prepared is to really understand what risks are relevant to where you live. So to that end, I kind of want to point you up here at the top. I have a table, and that is from our 2020 hazard mitigation plan that gets published every 5 years, and it's regional. It's Cabarrus, Stanley, and Union County together. But basically, I won't pretend that I know all the science behind it and can do all the math, but the state pays some very much smarter than me contractors to take a look at all the hazards we face from the critical infrastructure and the natural side and kind of compile a list of what we're most at risk for. So from the plan in our region, our highest ones are winter storms, thunderstorms with lots of wind to it, flooding, and then hurricanes. So you look at those are kind of your natural ones here in our region that we really focus on. But beyond the natural side, where you live, where you work, where you go to church, where you spend a lot of your time, that can also change your local risk pattern. So, for example, you may live near or work near a chemical processing facility. I'm over that stuff. We have 189 here in the county that deal with chemicals. Some are, some of the chemicals are just, it's like a gas station. Others are pretty dangerous stuff. So even though those processes and the facilities I work with, especially the dangerous ones, are really good about being on the P's and Q's and making sure everything's taken care of, accidents do happen, machinery fails. So that's you also have to look at what's around you from the technological side. And then the other thing, if you work in a government building or something like that, the chance of that being a target for terrorism or active shooter is a little bit higher than, if you spend your time working from home, right? So it's good to know what types of disasters are most likely to occur in your area So you can plan a little bit more specifically for those events, and then you can prioritize your preparedness activities. So in a lot of cases, there are public information and learning opportunities on the hazards faced within your community. For example, if you want to read the entire plan that I'm talking about here, it's published on the Cabarrus County website under the emergency management page. So you can get in and you can look, and then, I'm talking about chemical facilities. You actually, as a citizen and taxpayer, have the right to know what facilities are near you and what chemicals. And that's through your local emergency planning committee, which I'm over, and I'm more than willing, at another later date to walk through that with you. But it's important to know, because from having the information on what we actually face, then we can make our plan fit a little bit better. So creating your plan, start out here, a well thought out emergency plan is really, that's your key to being prepared. It's not just about jotting down a few ideas, making a list of, well, we probably do this or we could do that. You really want to have a detailed plan that every member of your family understands and can apply. So if you have young kids, you probably need to simplify it a little bit. If you have other considerations within your family, got to kind of adapt and customize it. There's no one size fits all, because everybody has different needs. So planning, the other thing, planning is not, it's not a piece of paper. I'll tell you though, in my role as a planner, I spend a lot of time, looking at paper plans where everything's written down. It's a process. So it's something that, you change, you practice, you adapt. It's fluid. It's not one and done. So what are the key components of your plan, in my opinion? First, you want to figure out how your family's going to communicate during an emergency. I think the biggest panic you'll get to is if you can't get a hold of the people you love when something's going wrong. So kind of as we're seeing up in the mountains, communication is tough. There's not cell service up there. So it's really, you kind of want to look at different ways you can communicate. One that I think is helpful is to kind of designate, if you have family or a friend that lives out of the area or out of the state, that every member of your family knows well, has the number to, can check in with. It's a good idea to kind of designate that person as your check-in point, because if your family lives really close or your neighbor's the check-in point, well, if something hits your area, they probably don't have access to anything either. But if you can get a line out to somebody who then can relay information, you can kind of offset that a little bit. The second component I think that's pretty important is you really want to know your evacuation routes and have meeting places. So you should have at least 2 meeting places for your family, kind of one that's near your home. So in case of it's not that it's not an important event, but a smaller scale emergency like a house fire or something, where everybody just needs to get out and you need to have quick accountability of where everyone is. We're all going to meet at the mailbox. You want to have that point. And then at the same time, you want to have one that's a little bit further away, because if you're dealing with a flood event and the neighborhood is flooding, meeting at the mailbox probably isn't the best place to be. So down the road at the church, or at the CVS on the corner, something like that. But having 2 backup ones there, and make sure you're able to get to those points, or to your family's house down the road. Make sure everyone in your family knows how to get there, because if something goes wrong, having to use Google Maps or Waze or something to get to where you're supposed to meet is not a great way to approach that. And then finally, just a point on the plan is you want to regularly update this. You want to practice it. Somebody may think you look a little weird if the whole family goes out to the mailbox and meets. The whole family meets up, but I promise the repetition and the practice makes perfect is a lie. Perfect practice makes perfect. So if you actually rehearse it the way you would do it in a real emergency, there's just intrinsic value in that. when it comes to updating your plan, an annual review is probably a good idea every year. And, you know, kind of a practice. I don't know if you need to do that every year, but, with young kids, at least rehearsing it, talking through it regularly is a good idea, because a plan that hasn't been practiced is just a theory, and a theory really does you no good in the real world. The practice also allows for identification of sticking points or problem areas where it looked really good on paper, but then you get out there and we don't quite move as quick as we want, or this person works the night shifts. They're actually not going to be awake when we're trying to make the contact, something like that. So the practice there really is important. And there's also the special considerations here. So if you have pets, if you have children, if you have elderly family members, there's other considerations you should look at, like mobility, comprehension, other complications your family may deal with. Personally, I have dementia in my family. So that's like the comprehension aspect of that is, it's a little bit harder to communicate. That's something where it's like, we probably can't rely on this member of my family to do things on their own in these sort of situations. So make sure everything is customized and fluid to what fits your family.
Oh, I have a question for you.
Of course.
So on the Cabarrus, the website, the emergency management site, is there like a sample plan that we can go and see that other people have in place, just to kind of give us an idea of where to start with the plans? Because sometimes it's kind of hard to, when you're thinking about the plan, what do I put there? And you can kind of build your plan from that. Does Cabarrus County offer something like that for us to go on and see the examples of the plans?
So not the county, but the state has a Ready NC website. FEMA also has ready.gov. The American Red Cross also does it. And I think I have them listed at the end, but all three of those you can find. I mean, it has lists for your emergency kit. It has planning principles, hazard profiles. They're pretty good resources. So we direct there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem. So, yep, moving on. Evacuation versus shelter in place is something I wanted to touch on. So in an emergency, kind of one of the most critical decisions you'll make is, do I stay or do I go? And, evacuations are usually suggested during emergencies like a fire, a flood, a hurricane, where you can kind of escape the threat, the immediate danger if you move areas, right? So, maybe you can't escape it all the way, but if it's flooding and your house is sitting by the river in the lowlands, moving uphill makes a lot more sense than sitting there and waiting. So you can at least mitigate a lot of the time, and that's when evacuation is a good idea. But to be honest, and this is terrible considering I work for the government, but if the government tells me I have to leave my home, I'm probably going to say no just because they told me to. But I'll say in the evacuation situation of immediate danger, this is one of the rare moments that I'd say, hey, listen to this one, because it's reserved for kind of the worst threats, and they only suggested FEMA coming down, the state, or us, if there's a significant and credible threat to that area. So I do recommend that you adhere to evacuation orders and kind of take a look at that predetermined evacuation route you looked at in your plan on how to get to where you need to be. On the other hand, there are certain emergencies where staying makes a lot more sense. Sheltering in place is usually a lot better idea when it comes to chemical spills, severe storms. There's if you're in the middle of a lightning storm, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to go outside and go somewhere else. But in events where it's rapid onset and there's probably not enough time to get outside the danger area, you're probably going to be recommended to shelter in place. And it's important to understand that there's kind of two different parts to shelter in place. When I say shelter in place, if you've heard it before, you're probably going to think of like the tornado drills you or your kids had to do in school, where you're covering and staying low. And that's correct for severe weather. But there's another aspect of shelter in place which I care a lot about from the hazmat side, but during a chemical spill or something like that, there's shelter in place with sealing the room. And sealing the room refers to the efforts you can do to make sure no outside air that may be contaminated with anything can get in. Our county is a host county for the McGuire Nuclear Station, and I don't think that will ever have any issues or anything like that. And I also don't think the effects would ever reach all the way over here. But that is something our neighbor deals with. But in order to kind of mitigate that, you want to seal the room, which entails turning off all fans, your AC unit, even though it might get hot, especially in the summer around here with how humid it is. And you want to block the outside air on a door, a window, anywhere it can come in with, tape, plastic wrap, something like that, just to basically, you've got the good air and the bad air, and you want to keep them separate until everything clears. So I did want to touch on that just because we say shelter in place a lot, but our office has been working through, if we say that and we mean, shelter in place with sealing, a lot of people have never heard that before. And that's staying in a room when there's bad gas coming doesn't help too much without it sealed. So knowing when to stay, when to go, and kind of listening to the advice there is really critical. It really does save lives. And it's really important to just stay informed during an emergency, make sure you're receiving the alerts, your weather, and follow the advice of what we put out. So I would argue this is probably one of the most important parts of being prepared. And it's your emergency kit. It's your lifeline during the first few days of a disaster. Kind of the going recommendation is 72 hours, 3 days. And you want everything you and your family would need. If you didn't have to leave the door of your house or leave your property, you'd be fully self-sufficient. So, in a basic kit, you'll see things. You want water, food, flashlight batteries, emergency contact information, portable chargers, blankets, pillows, spare clothes, alternate lighting like candles, and definitely a first aid kit. And that's kind of, that's basic stuff that everybody's probably heard before is good to have, but you also need to think about your specific needs and the needs of your family. So if you take a daily prescription, you have a 30-day supply and the disaster happens on day 28. That's not a great, that's not a great time to be running out of medication. So, a couple spare pills of something that's essential. Think about if you wear glasses or contacts, make sure you have a little saline or a spare pair of contacts or a spare pair of glasses, because if you can't see, that just makes everything a whole lot worse too. And then you want to look at it. If you have pets, a lot of times we forget, we can pack everything for us and have it sitting away, but then we forget that, Fido's got to eat too. It needs water as well and all of that. So I recommend, if you have pets, food, water, toys, spare leashes. And if your pet doesn't normally wear a collar, maybe an ID tag type collar, just in case it gets loose. It's a lot easier to get reunited with your pet. And, if you have children, don't forget the comfort items. A favorite stuffed animal, toys to keep them busy. And, the comfort items aren't just for your kids. It's important to, pack things like a good book or, the good book, playing cards. And, like this photo has Uno on it. I don't know if Uno is a great idea, at least in my family. That causes more arguments than it does bonding time. But, having stuff that you really, you can occupy your time with, take everybody's mind off of what's going on, and, building that into your essentials is a great idea. FEMA, we just talked about, but FEMA on ready.gov has a great list of beginner supplies. That's just, if you want an actual checklist that'll run through, here's A, B, C, and D of what I should put in here. That's a great place to start, and I like to send people there. And then finally on your kit, I recommend checking it at least once a year. You want to replace the expired items and adjust what's in the kit based on your family's changing needs. If you have a kit that's 3 years old, the toys your kids liked when you were younger may not be the same things that would keep them occupied 3 years from now. Additionally, food goes bad, even the canned goods. So making sure that's up to date is important. So kind of my third piece here is basic skills for an emergency. You can have the plan, you can have the kit, but if you don't have the skills to enact the plan or use the things in your kit, it's pretty worthless. So, some questions to look at. Do you know how to shut off the gas, the water, the electricity in your home? Do you know where the breaker box is, the main lines, things like that? Everybody has a first aid kit in their emergency kit, but do you know basic first aid? Do you know CPR? If your church, your work, or somewhere else has an AED, do you know how to operate that? You know how to use it? Some of those skills are just, they have so much value in an emergency, especially on the medical side. They really, you can save a life, and you can, EMS, and we're seeing up west where it's just, in the beginning, they couldn't get people to them. So if you have the basic skills to help keep somebody alive a little bit longer and extend that timetable, that's so valuable, even on our end as responders, knowing we have somebody there that is able to extend that timeline. In terms of things like shutting off the gas after an earthquake, tornado, or something like that, we're worried about it when the power gets cut back on, but when things get ruptured, one spark can cause a fire, an explosion. So being able to shut that off and remove that hazard as well is so helpful. And it's kind of, I say these things, and it takes time to learn this stuff. So, if you don't have these skills yet, I encourage you to look at like local training opportunities. The Red Cross does local first aid and CPR courses all the time. And it's a day or two, a night or two. So it's a little bit of a time commitment, but I'll take that trade all day, every day. And they do offer online courses and some of this stuff as well. I definitely recommend the in-person training when it comes to medical skills. There's only so much you can learn through a screen, but for the other things like shutting the breaker box or shutting off the gas or something like that, changing a tire, I'd say that's a Google YouTube search. Watch a video on it, see kind of how it works, and look at it that way. And I'm a YouTube mechanic, electrician, all of that stuff. I break half of it a little bit more, but I found you can learn a lot through there. It's an easy resource. Yep. So when it comes to this stuff, just remember you can have the perfect plan. You have the best stocked emergency kit with all the cool items in it. But if you don't know how to use them, or you don't practice how to effectively carry out the plan and take the items in your kit, plan's a theory. Everything in your kit is just a paperweight. That's really what it boils down to. So touch a little bit more on communication here. As we're seeing in the West, in a lot of the emergencies, cell phone networks get inundated with calls, get overloaded, and you just can't get through. So it's important to have backup communication plans there. There's not a great answer here because, we all use our cell phones. Very few people have landlines, but even if you have a landline, that's probably going down too. When it comes to short term, if you have family that lives close, a walkie-talkie, a cheap pair that can reach, 300 yards from Walmart for $20 or so is worth the investment. If you don't have family close or you need to reach out, your cell line and your internet line are not the same thing on your phone. So if you have, I think I've got GroupMe up here, the social media, if you have some way to contact that isn't just through a text message, that could be an alternative too if you can get internet. And finally on that, I've got a picture here of a weather radio. That is one of the most critical, it's starting to become redundant or we were thinking that until we kind of look at the storms where we're getting our phones knocked out. But that will, if you have a weather radio that's battery powered, you can get, the tornado watches and warnings, the flooding warnings and stuff, independent of whether or not your phone has battery or service and signal. So those are kind of some things I'd consider in your plan as you're moving through communications. So on the same note as kind of the weather radio, information is one of the most important things during a disaster situation. the more you know, the better you're able to make those informed decisions. So to this end, we're asking about resources. There's a FEMA app, there's a Red Cross app, which offer real-time updates, emergency instructions, and additional information on the planning, the kit stocking, the other helpful stuff that we kind of talked about. When it comes to receiving alerts within the county, I recommend signing up for our Everbridge alert system. In the county, we use our own third-party vendor to push out emergency alerts. So kind of, if you've been driving around here this weekend, you've probably had one pop up of, travel banned west of 77 or the flash flooding. Those are the alerts that come in through the federal side into the state. If we just push one out at the county level, it'll come through Everbridge. And Everbridge is a opt-in program. So in order to get those, you would have to opt in. So to get to that, that's on our side as well. And it's right there. That's a screenshot from it, but it's Cabco alerts and the register button. And then from there to walk you through the rest of it. But if you don't do that, it's not the end of the world, because you'll still get pushed the FEMA, the state ones that have that hazard information coming down. Moving. So continuity of operations. So as you said in my introduction, I manage this program for the county, but basically continuity boils down to, how do I keep everything moving as similar to normal operations in the middle of an emergency? So kind of, if we apply it to your life, it's the actions, activities, and strategies you can enact to keep those aspects running. You may have heard the term in the corporate setting, but it's not just for business stuff. Your family should have one too. It means having a plan for how you're going to access those really critical, important documents and continue daily functions during a disaster. So, to think about what documents are essential, you've got your IDs, your insurance information, social security cards, birth certificates, property deeds, and other critical paperwork that is that's essential. Kind of, if you need something, I recommend kind of keeping that in a locking, fire, and waterproof lockbox safe. In the event your home is damaged, if it's fireproof, nothing is ever truly fireproof or floodproof, but if it's a good one, and it survives, you've now saved yourself the heartache and hassle of trying to get with the government and go through how to get original copies and stuff of that. Additionally, if they're in that safe location, have a digital copy, in your drive, saved to your phone, something like that. That way you can access the information on it without having to remove the original physical copy, and kind of safeguard that information. And then additionally, I'm sure some of you work from home, own your own business or something, that make sure that you have a backup plan to continue operations of your business if you're not at home. So where we would recommend, as I'm working through the continuity, I recommend that everybody has this alternate location they can go to continue their work here in the county. But if your primary location is your home, you can't exactly work from home if your home goes down, if that makes sense. So moving through, kind of on the same track there. Disasters don't just hit you physically. They can have serious financial impacts. It's important to prepare financially. That's one of the biggest things. If getting an emergency fund put together is critical. Kind of the gurus, the experts recommend saving enough to cover 3 to 6 months of expenses from that fund. And, that's easier said than done at times, especially with the economy. But, putting away every little bit that you can incrementally to grow that is it's a great step in your preparedness. And then the hardest thing, at least for me, is then just don't touch it. But, get your financial stuff set together, and then make sure you have copies and you're safeguarding those financial documents, that insurance policy, those property deeds, things like that as well. And then finally, the other thing I would look at is, I'm guilty of this as well, but a lot of times we forget to review our insurance policies because we get a good rate and we're good to go. But as you're as there's a change to your life, to your status, make sure you have adequate coverage for your health, your home, your car, any valuables that change, because after a disaster, insurance is not going to care that you meant to update it. They're not going to accept that. So that's a good thing to consider as well. So once the immediate danger is passed, we kind of move into the recovery phase. So this process, it can be long, it can be really challenging. In the western part of the state, this is going to be tough just because of the sheer damage to it. When you move into this state and you kind of return home, if you've left or you're trying to figure out what it is, you want to assess the damage to your home and property. You want to, take photos of everything from every angle. That way it's easier to go through insurance purposes and contact them, and there's no real debate on whether this actually happened in the storm or not. Make sure everything's documented. And then if you're returning to your home or if it's been damaged, make sure it's safe to re-enter. You want to check for gas leaks. Do you smell gas? Do you see something? Do you see structural damage? Are there any physical hazards? If you're insured or have any safety concerns whatsoever, err on the side of caution here. Ask a firefighter to take a look. Ask the construction people, we send out to do damage assessment. Finding out whether or not it's safe is not something you really should be doing. Leaving that. So leave that to the emergency side. And the other piece of recovery is, it's not just physical, it's emotional as well. So lean on your community, your support network, your local resources. There are programs out there, and your individual network to really help you through these things. And kind of moving through that, the mental health, I'll tell you, the mental health is one of the biggest hurdles that got ignored for the longest time in the realm of disaster work. So, they take a toll. Stress, anxiety, trauma, it's common during and after. It's important to kind of think through how you as a person cope and develop effective coping strategies as part of your preparedness and planning. Everybody wants to believe that they're going to be perfect and cool-headed during an emergency situation, but the reality is sometimes you are, sometimes you aren't, and it's not consistent if you deal with multiple. So make sure you have something you've thought through, kind of, or how to calm yourself down, the deep breathing or the mindfulness in the middle of the event, that way you can make those clear decisions. And then after the fact, you really want to make sure, for like the long-term stuff, if we move into it, make sure you're reaching out to friends, family, professionals, kind of working through that healing process, because as everybody deals with it differently, but there's trends of you kind of, your sense of security can get robbed a little bit there, your confidence in your public system and stuff like that, and just your safety. So there's a lot of stuff you really got to think through and work through there, and placing that as a priority is definitely at the top of my list when it comes to enhancing community preparedness. But yeah, I think that is the end of my spiel. So I would love if you guys had some questions for me.
I have a question, Cole. Can you
Of course.
just please distinguish again with the difference between the Everbridge, and you said you get normal alerts from I guess FEMA, but Everbridge, is that specific to Cabarrus County, or what is that?
Yes, Everbridge is the third-party vendor Cabarrus County uses to push our alerts. So if an alert originates from the county, from my office, it gets pushed through the Everbridge system. So that's why. And you have to opt into that. The alerts you get on your phone, there are agreements with the major carriers, Sprint, AT&T, to where they've told the government they will push these alerts to all phones in an area. Everbridge is our county side that we push, so that one is opt-in.
And will that include all types of alerts? Will that be include weather, like natural disasters, like you said? What type of alerts are part of Everbridge if you sign up for that?
Everbridge are the ones, so it'll be the weather, the disaster information, if we're opening a shelter, where that would be located, things like that, but there'll be alerts that would originate from my office, not coming from the state or federal.
Okay. And I also thought about what you said. I think when we hear about disasters, we oftentimes only think about the physical parts that we can see. So I'm a big proponent on mental health as well. So I really love that you did pull that piece in, saying that it does affect you mentally after you have been through a disaster, or you may have a family member that has went through it. So taking care of our mental health during disasters is important too. And that's something that I never thought of before when we talk about being prepared. So we need to prepare ourselves also for what could happen in our minds after disaster. So I thought that was a good point. Does anyone else have any more questions or need any clarification about anything at all? No? Well, I'd like to thank you, Cole, for giving us this valuable information. I also liked in that emergency kit, I saw the Uno cards. And so I think, hey, that's something that we need to put in our emergency kit too, some type of game. And my family might get in a little argument too if we had to put a certain type of game in there. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for coming out. I hope that if you were in the process of thinking about getting a plan in place, that you got some information tonight that will help you solidify that plan or push you a little bit more in the direction to have a plan. As Cole said, that you can go to American Red Cross, FEMA, all these resources are available for us to jumpstart our plans, to stay prepared because of what just happened. We don't want to be caught off guard and not having anything at all in place. So thank you so much, Cole. And thank you everyone for coming out. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their night.
Thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it. And I did throw this up as well. There at the bottom, links don't really help through presentation, but ready.gov, Red Cross, Ready NC, those are those resources. And then if you have a question, my email is up there. Please feel free. I am a public servant. I'm a county servant. I am more than willing to help and answer anything you have. Please feel free to reach out to me.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Good
Good night, everyone.